the undisputed, most diabolical fantasy villains in the world, Fantasy Brain!
What's up, Brainiacs? Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Brains podcast. And today we're going to be bringing you episode 4 of the 32-team series. Today we are going to be covering the Cincinnati Bengals to cap off the AFC North. We started with the Steelers, followed that up with the Ravens, then the Browns, and then today we are going from one of the worst teams in the NFL with the Browns to now one of the best offenses in the NFL, if not the best, with the Cincinnati Bengals. For those who haven't caught the previous videos, this 32-team series is a really exciting series that we are putting together where we are going through every single NFL team, specifically their offense, and statting out exactly how we project this season to go for them, really looking at how many passing yards are they going to throw for, how many rushing yards are they going to have, and what do those target shares and those rushing percentages look like among the guys on this depth chart. How do the new rookies come into play? How do the new free agents shake up? So as you can see on my right, we got our fantasy whiteboard. We'll be filling that out completely today, looking at stuff, like I said, with the depth chart changes from last year. The entire fantasy football forecast. We'll look into their strength of schedule as well as some week 15, 16, 17, also known as the fantasy playoff matchups for the Cincinnati Bengals. And then we'll just answer some miscellaneous storylines that could affect the course of this season for the Bengals. Now, before we get started with this video, make sure to check out our social media accounts at Leatherbrains. You can check us out on Twitter. You can check us out on Instagram. We got a lot of great fantasy content coming out on TikTok as well. And then you can check out all of our episodes on YouTube as well as Spotify if you're looking for only the audio version. And then you can also make sure to check out the Leatherbrains channel as well for the other show. They're going to be talking about more real life NFL content every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. But like I said, we're going to get right into this one, talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. So looking at their depth chart, I mean, this is basically the same team that we had last year. You got Joe Burrow leading the pack, had a terrific season last year, almost 5,000 passing yards, over 40 touchdowns and less than 10 interceptions. He came back from, I don't even think people remember this, but before the season, people were questioning whether he still had the same arm talent after he had that wrist ligament surgery from the year before, where he wasn't even able to throw a ball once he got injured in the Ravens game. I think it was a Thursday night game in 2023. And a lot of people were kind of questioning that ability, and he proved everybody wrong. Had an outstanding season, and he's definitely going to be one of the favorites coming in for MVP. At running back, we got Chase Brown coming off a breakout season as well, where he started the season as a backup, but as Zack Moss went down with an injury, Chase Brown was able to take advantage of not only being a great player, but being able to be a good back and a great offense, which will yield a lot of fantasy points. But Zack Moss is also back from injury. He will return. And then they drafted Taj Brooks in the 6th round of the NFL draft, a running back from Texas Tech who does profile a little bit more as a receiving back. He's only 5'9", so his capability is a little bit limited, but who knows if he will make much of an impact this season or if he's more of a future play for them. Looking at the receiver room, we got Jamar Chase, fresh off a triple crown, T. Higgins, another guy fresh off a great season. And obviously when Burrow has a great season, everyone's going to have a great season. But those are, your 1 and 2, probably the best duo in the league. And then you have Andrei Iosivas, who is also coming off, I wouldn't say a great season, but a good season for somebody who nobody was really talking about last year. And you also have rookie Jermaine Burton, or now second-year player Jermaine Burton, who had a lot of off-the-field issues last year, had a lot of work ethic issues, a lot of personal stuff. We don't know if that's really going to be cleaned up at this point, but him and Iosivas are going to be fighting for those snaps at the wide receiver 3. And I think right now you got to favor Iosivas considering how consistent he was last year, and also knowing that Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are both outside receivers, and Iosivas profiles more as a slot receiver, whereas Burton is more of a deep threat outside receiver. But I do think they'll give Burton some run this year, as he was a day 2 pick last year, I think early in the 3rd round. So we'll see how this wide receiver room works out, but it does look like Iosivas should take the majority of the number 3 snaps, at least when they're running him in the slot. At tight end, they have Mike Gesicki, fresh off an extension. They got a couple other guys, Tanner Hudson, Drew Sample, but those guys are never going to be very relevant in fantasy. They are more for blocking. But let's get right on to the fantasy football forecast, which is what all of you are here to see. I got this Bengals offense having a crazy year again. I mean, I know that It's hard to predict back-to-back insane years, but you look at Joe Burrow, he had 4,900 passing yards last year. I'm not projecting him for 4,900 yards. You just can't do that. There's no way you're projecting a player to have almost 5,000 passing yards. But I think he is going to lead the league in passing most likely. I have him going for about 4,400 passing yards, 400 completions, and 38 passing touchdowns, which is top 2 to 3 in all categories. I think it honestly might be number 1 for each of those categories among my statted out players. But Joe Burrow is going to be in for a huge year. I have him ranked in my rankings as the quarterback 3 this year. I have him over Jaden Daniels, who's currently being drafted ahead of him. So Burrow is at ADP right now, going as the quarterback 4. In best ball formats, I know that he's actually going as the quarterback 5 behind Jalen Hurts as well. And I just like him a little bit more than both Hurts and Daniels because I believe in that Bengals offense to be completely centered around Burrow. Whereas I think the Commanders are going to have a little bit worse of an offense, and the Eagles are going to have a great offense, but I think Saquon is going to vulture a lot of those touchdowns this year, and that's where Burrow might have the edge over Hurts. I will say I don't love the value on Joe Burrow in these drafts because a quarterback with limited rushing upside, for him to have an insane season again, he would have to throw for, like I said, 4,500 passing yards and 40 touchdowns almost. Whereas these other quarterbacks that I just named, Daniels and Hurts, you have a rushing floor every single week where if they're giving you 40 to 50 rushing yards and maybe a rushing touchdown plus whatever they throw in the air, that is always going to be better and give you higher upside than a guy like Joe Burrow, such as Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, who are quarterback 1 and 2. So I think that with Burrow, I just don't love the value here. I think that, with the elite quarterbacks, I think you have Lamar, you have Allen. After that, I would consider waiting because there is a lot of depth at the quarterback position this year. And so I think with Burrow, if you have Chase, I don't mind going for the stack. Same if you have Higgins, but I don't think that you should be reaching on Burrow by any means because without the rushing upside, his ceiling is capped for sure. Looking at the running back, Chase Brown is a guy that I wouldn't say low on last year, but I was definitely not on him. Gabe and Charlie, other guys on the Fantasy Brains podcast, were both on Chase Brown last year, so shout out to them. But I'm fully on the Chase Brown train. He had a great year last year. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, Zack Moss started the season strong, but he went down, and Chase Brown comes in as an explosive back, which is just what the Bengals offense needs. Because when you're the Cincinnati Bengals, and you're going up against all these teams, throughout the entire season, the way that you game plan against this Bengals offense is you have to try to take out Jamar Chase. And then if you can somehow do that, you still have to worry about T. Higgins. So Chase Brown is likely never facing a stacked box. And I know their O-line play has not been great, but if he can get around a 70 to 80% snap share like he saw for the second half of last season, he is going to have another tremendous year. There's going to be so many touchdown opportunities. He could easily score, and this is not an exaggeration at all. He could easily score around 10 to 20 touchdowns. I currently have Chase Brown statted for 970 rush yards and 9 touchdowns on the ground, and then 40 catches, 400 yards, and 2 touchdowns through the air. So I have him going for about 1,300 total yards, about 11 touchdowns, and 40 catches. So I have him having an incredible year. He comes in as my running back 10. And while it might seem like I'm a little higher than running back 10 on him, he's going right now as the RB12, so I have him a little bit higher. But I think that he is the last guy in that top tier of players, of running backs. So if you're looking at the guys being drafted before Chase Brown, you have guys like Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, Bucky Irving. Those are 3 running backs where I think Chase Brown is easily on the same level as all those guys. And I think that he easily could outperform all those guys or at least be on the same level as them. And then you look at the guys below him, that's where you get to Breece Hall and Kyron Williams and Joe Mixon and those running backs, James Cook. So I like him a lot more than those guys. I think that he has higher receiving upside. And I think that just being in this Bengals offense with the speed that he has, with the amount of completions that I'm projecting Joe Burrow to have this season, Chase Brown is in for a huge workload. And even with Zack Moss, who, I got him ranked to my running back 73 on the season. I don't have him doing anything crazy this year. I have him going for about 350 rush yards, 3 touchdowns, 20 catches as well. So I think they're going to mix him in, of course. I don't think Chase Brown's going to go out there and dominate the touches 100% of the touches like we saw guys like CMC do in the past. But I think that Zack Moss is going to get in, especially on the pass protection downs, because that was the reason that he was playing last year. So with this rushing attack in general, I'm not very high on it in terms of the volume overall. But because Chase Brown is getting all of that volume, I do like him along with the reception upside. So that averages out to about a total of 1,700 rush yards and 14 rushing touchdowns, which would rank bottom 5, bottom 8 in the NFL just because of how much they're going to throw the ball. Looking at the receivers, I mean, Jamar Chase, he is ranked as the receiver 1. I have him as the receiver 1. I think that it's crazy if you don't have Chase at the receiver 1. I think it's just pretty easy. And a lot of people are going to give the argument that, you finish as the number 1 player in fantasy. You rarely ever repeat. That might be true. Maybe he doesn't repeat as the number 1, but this guy is such a lock to be a top 5 fantasy receiver. He has incredible quarterback play. He's an incredible player. He can turn a 5-yard screen pass into a touchdown in a millisecond. He is a do-it-all receiver. So I have him going for 118 receptions, a little bit over 1,300 yards, and 11 touchdowns. Now, again, you might be thinking to yourself when you're hearing these projections, oh, he had 1,800 yards last year, so you're projecting him to have 500 less yards. If you just check out, go to Underdog, go to FanDuel, DraftKings, whatever, and you can see the over-unders for players. You are never projecting a player to have that crazy of a season. You have to evaluate things like the potential of missing a few weeks, having a few bad games, and just kind of looking at more of the average. So I think Chase is going to have a crazy year, but projection wise, that's what I have him going for. A little bit over 1,300, 11 touchdowns, and almost 120 catches. He's the receiver 1 in fantasy. There's no doubt about that. Going on to T. Higgins, who this is easily the most polarizing player in this offense in my eyes, where I was very high on him earlier in his career. I'm still high on him now. He is a terrific talent, and he fits in perfectly as the receiver 2 in this offense. Great hands, great deep. He's a great deep threat, very consistent as well. The problem with Higgins is that he's had issues staying on the field the entire season. He's consistently had whether it's like a hamstring or an ankle injury, something that will derail his season for about 4 to 5 weeks. And it seems like that happens almost every season for him. And so that is my concern a little bit with taking him as the receiver. Right now, he's going as the receiver 14. I also have him ranked as the receiver 14, so we match up well there. I have him going for 85 catches for almost 9 touchdowns and 1,050 yards. So I have him having a great season. I have him inside my top 15, but I do know he has shown to be injury prone in the past. And that does concern me a little bit. And I think some of these guys that are getting drafted right behind him, similar to how I was just talking about how I think Chase Brown is at the end of that tier, I think T. Higgins is at the start of that next tier. So I think that he might be a little bit worse of a value because I'm looking at guys like Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, Terry McLaurin, even AJ Brown, who are all in that same tier of players. And I think I would not necessarily rather have all those guys, but I think all of those guys could easily have better seasons than Higgins. And I think that a lot of people have Higgins rated higher because he was top 5 in points per game last year. When he did play, he was the wide receiver 5 in points per game. And when you have Chase at receiver 1 and Higgins at receiver 5 in points per game, that's absolutely absurd. But it also just kind of screams to do that 2 years in a row would be very, very surprising. I think that's I think that's what people are almost expecting this year. So I think that's where I temper my expectations a little bit on Higgins. And I say, he's going to finish, I think, in between the receiver 12 to 20. And if he finished around the 18 or 19 mark, I wouldn't be that surprised. And that's why I'm a little bit higher on those other guys who I just named, because not only do I think they could easily outperform him, but they're all also wide receiver 1s on their team. Whereas Higgins comes in as a wide receiver 2 in the best passing offense. Looking at the next receiver, we got Andrei Iosivas. He's going as the receiver 84. I got him at the receiver 73. I have him finishing for about 50 catches. So again, we have the Bengals going for 400 completions. Those completions have to go somewhere. I got him going for about 50 catches, about 450 yards and 4 touchdowns. So I think he'll do he will have a solid season as a receiver 3. Do I like him in a redraft league? No, you're not going to draft him. In a best ball league, do I like him? Still not really. I think he has upside because of how high volume and passing offense is. And if you get Joe Burrow, obviously that's a great stack. But I don't think he serves much value. I do think, however, like I mentioned, I think he will be the slot receiver over Jermaine Burton, and we'll see a higher snap share than him. So I think if you're deciding between those two guys, I think Iosivas is going to be your guy in that scenario. And then looking at Mike Gesicki, I got him ranked pretty high, actually. I have him ranked right now as my tight end 18. He's going as a tight end 24. And my mindset on Gesicki is high volume pass offense, a lot of touchdown potential. That's exactly what Gesicki has always been great at. Now, his issue is going to be snap share. What is a snap share going to look like? Because he doesn't play those early downs. So if you have a first down and it looks like they're going to run and then they throw a play action, he's not going to be the tight end on the field. But he could catch a lot of touchdowns in this offense, especially if they're going to be down in these games. He could be getting pestered with receptions over the middle of the field. So I have him going for about 55 catches, about 650 yards, and 7 touchdowns. So I have Gesicki finishing with a really good year. And then I have Eric All, who's going to be probably, I'd say, the next tight end up in the passing down scenarios, going for about 20 catches, 200 yards. So again, Gesicki's not going to be playing that crazy high snap share, but because of how much the Bengals are going to be throwing, I think he's going to be great. And, tight end 18, that's nothing to write home about, but he's getting drafted as the tight end 24. And I think I like his upside over guys like Cade Otton, Zach Ertz, Pat Freiermuth, Isaiah Likely. I just think that in this Bengals offense, if you're looking for weekly upside, Gesicki could easily go out there and give you 6 catches, 75 yards, 2 touchdowns, whereas I just don't know if those other guys can. That'll wrap up the forecast part of this episode. So again, when you look at this Bengals offense, it's just points, points, points. They are going to score a ton of points. And I think that's like with one of the storylines, and I think the biggest storyline is, are we going to see the same thing that we saw last year where the Bengals had the worst defense in the NFL? And you might say, "Oh, why does that matter?" But when the Bengals are down by 20 points in every game, all they're going to do is throw the ball. Joe Burrow is just chucking the ball downfield, and obviously their offense is great. So you have all these high-scoring games because their defense is allowing all these points. I like the Shamar Stewart pick. Now, there's some issues with him signing his contract, and I know Trey Hendrickson has some issues at all. But even if this defense goes from rank 32 to rank 20, which is still on the bottom average of the league, there's going to be a lot less opportunity for this passing offense. And I know it's the Bengals. Like, they'll go down to the 1-yard line and throw 3 times in a row. And that's just the beauty of having these guys and the beauty of the offense that Zach Taylor runs. But I just don't know if we can expect the same passing volume for Joe Burrow if that defense improves, which is where I have the 600-yard decrease, 6 touchdown decrease, because you have to realize that a lot of that came from them being down very early in every single game and just having to abandon the complete game plan of establishing the run. So I think that's an interesting storyline to really watch with this defense this season and just in general with their schedule, which I'm getting to right now. If we look at their strength of schedule, it does not look great. You have the second hardest schedule for quarterbacks. Now, Joe Burrow's great. He's an elite quarterback. You're never going to bench him because of a matchup. So I don't think it's something that you have to worry about with this team, luckily, is that he's a matchup proof quarterback. When you look at the running back room, this is the only kind of strength of schedule that they are, I would say, good for. And that is that they have the 10th easiest strength of schedule for running back. So that's also why I think Chase Brown could definitely eat because, if they're facing off defenses that struggle a little bit more against the run, I think that's where they could rely on the run game, especially once you start to get to the second half of the season. The game starts to get a little bit colder, taking those hits for a defender against the running back, it's going to be different. And I think that's where you could really start to see Chase Brown really exceed is that second half of the season, similar to what he did last year. But I think that's where, you have the 10th easiest, and then you go to receiver, which is the 25th rank. So you're in the bottom 10 in terms of difficulty for that and tight end, which comes in at number 29. But I've mentioned it in the last few. One, you can't take strength of schedule too seriously because what happened last year doesn't mean it's going to happen this year. There's so much variance from season to season. And so just because the defense was great last year and the secondary was great last year doesn't mean they'll be good again, and vice versa. So with the receivers, it looks brutal. You have the seventh or eighth hardest schedule in the league, but it's Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Again, these are matchup proof players. So regardless of who they're playing, you're going to be starting them every single week. And I've talked about it in previous videos as well, but for the tight end, I'm not as concerned with it because I think there's a little bit more variance to who is guarding the tight end, whether that's a cornerback, whether that's a linebacker, whether that's a nickel corner, an edge, safety, whatever it might be. So I think with their strength of schedule, it obviously looks brutal for the passing offense, but their passing offense is so good that you almost have to just kind of ignore that because you're not going to sit any of these players just because they're playing a good defense. They're just too good for that. But I think where you can really get excited about this team is the playoff schedule. And this is going to be great for best ball leagues where, those weeks 15, 16, 17 matter the most. But you're at home against the Ravens in week 15, which we all know how those games go. They are always close and they are always crazy high scoring. Jamar Chase had like a 50-point game against the Ravens last year and did it the year before as well. And I think his rookie year. You have week 16 in Miami. Not only is the Dolphins secondary terrible, but you also have a warm weather game, which in week 16, it's going to be snowy in some aspects of the United States or some areas of the United States. And getting to play in warm weather is going to be great for a guy like Joe Burrow. They might be winning a lot in that game, so that could be a better game for Chase Brown. But still, I think the Dolphins secondary is going to be weak. The Bengals could be fighting for a playoff spot. So at that point, it's still, all gas, no brakes. And then week 17, you get another beautiful matchup at home against Arizona, another team where, this game could be a shootout. I'm not high on the Cardinals, but their offense is good. They have some good players, and their defense, especially their secondary, can be questionable at times. So I think when you're looking at this playoff schedule, this might be a top 3 playoff schedule out of any team in the NFL. And when you combine that with the high upside that players like Joe Burrow and T. Higgins and Jamar Chase have, it is looking great if you make the fantasy playoffs this year and have players on the Bengals roster, because these could be some really, really high scoring games in the playoffs. All of them look like they're either going to be high scoring or warm weather games where there's going to be a lot of passing upside. So I love this Bengals team. I think when you're looking at, I think one of the beauties of doing, statting out all these players and really looking at it that way is that you realize that, if Burrow's throwing for 4,500 passing yards, that's got to go somewhere. And when you really break it down, you realize how good this Bengals offense is going to be. And if you believe in Burrow to have a really good season, then there are going to be beneficiaries of that. And I think we can all agree that Joe Burrow is going to have another great season. So I would buy every piece on this Bengals offense. I would say get Burrow if you can, if you have one of those Bengals receivers. Or, if you get a value on him. Jamar Chase is obvious. He's going to go first overall. I'm a little bit lower on Higgins, but again, I still do really like him. I just would put him in that range of those other players. Definitely go get Chase Brown. He's the best value in this offense. And then Mike Gesicki can also give you some upside as a backup tight end. So hopefully you guys all enjoyed this episode with the Cincinnati Bengals, where we capped off the AFC North. The next division that we are going to do is the NFC North. So I'm very excited to do that. A lot of great teams in that division. But definitely let us know in the comment section what else you would like me to talk about. If you want me to look more into individual games last year, more projections, more lines that we can look at from these books like FanDuel and DraftKings. Whatever you guys want me to do, I will look a little bit further into that. So let me know in the comments for sure. And again, make sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts at Leatherbrains. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and then make sure to hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel and check out our content there, as well as giving us that follow on our Spotify to find all of our audio podcasts. I really hope everybody enjoyed this one. Thank you all for listening, and we're out.
3, 2, 1.
Got a blast!
Thanks for checking out the Fantasy Brains. Don't miss next week's episode, Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. See you next week, Brainiacs.